Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is Consumer Editor Jeremy Korzeniewski. How are you, man?
You know, it's 70-something degrees today, and for March 30th in the great state of Ohio, I'd say that's a win.
It is. It's getting there today as well. It's actually still in the 40s, but it's going to be up into the 60s within like 5 or 6 hours. So
Nice.
I just walked the dog, got a little more of a sweat going than I was expecting. So maybe it's the first time in a while that I won't have to wear hats and gloves later in the day. So that'd be kind of nice.
Something to look forward to.
We have a great show for you today. Lots of stuff to look forward. Let's see. We're going to talk about the Lotus Eletre. You think I said that right? They've put out some documents on how to pronounce it. It's kind of easy to trip over, but it's a really tasty looking thing. Let's put it that way. I've seen a lot of comparisons to the Lamborghini Urus, so we'll get into that. We have a teaser on the Ferrari Purosangue, I think. Talk about really hard exotic SUVs to crossovers to lead off the show with. But that's what's in the news this week. We expect we're going to see the full pictures of the Ferrari coming up pretty soon. The Stellantis inline-six, that's interesting, I think. Maybe a little nerdy, but really sort of the replacement for displacement, quite frankly. This engine sounds like something I would be very excited to drive. All of the inline-sixes that I've tested recently, specifically in Mercedes and in BMWs, have been very, very good. So I think this is something Stellantis could bring to the table. That'll be on the show. We'll also talk, we'll see what else we have time for, but some other news hits maybe. And then we have kind of a fun feature segment. Jeremy and I both like football and basketball. And as you all know, the Final Four is coming up this weekend. It's a great matchup, a couple of great matchups, and then the title game is going to be great too, obviously. We're going to debate what is a blue blood in the automotive sector. Kansas, Duke, Villanova, those are definitely, North Carolina. They are definitely blue bloods in basketball, and of course, like you have Notre Dame, Michigan, Alabama, and football and so forth. Ohio State, down where Jeremy is. But just for fun, no scientific, metrics here. We'll kind of, throw in some automotive equivalents. Finally, do things a little bit different this week. We'll close things out with Jeremy's review of the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk. So this Lotus is quite the crossover. Mm-hmm. It is a big step forward for Lotus. They don't do many product reveals. Literally, it's sort of like a twice a decade thing when something new comes out from them. This is, in some ways, they're a little bit late to the party, I think. Like, hey, we're going to do a crossover. Well, cool. That's what all the other luxury and sporting brands did about 10 years ago. But I mean, just it looks good. It's, I think it could definitely bring in a lot of new buyers to them and reinvigorate the Lotus brand. I think with other brands, sometimes like Alfa Romeo or maybe even Ferrari, we'll get to this in the next segment. Yeah, I sort of question, like, does your buyer really need a crossover? Like the Aston Martin DBX is another good example. Or you want the sports car, then you just go buy an Escalade or a G-Class or something. Like when you want to go into that SUV space, you just go to an SUV. Mm-hmm. You don't stay with the same brand, if you will. Lotus's footprint is so small. I sort of feel like there's going to be enough people that look at this as a desirable thing in its own right. And I'll just kind of stop there. I mean, what do you think?
Well, okay. So first I'm going to comment on the looks. A lot of people are saying, the Lamborghini Urus. I see it and I get that. I get why people's brains go there. My brain also goes, the current 8th generation mid-engine Corvette. It looks like, the offspring of a Corvette and an Urus. I don't know if that's good or bad. I certainly don't see it as unattractive, but I also see it as derivative. And these kind of complaints come out every time a new vehicle is launched. People say it looks like this, it looks like that. I realize that I'm doing exactly that while criticizing other people for doing it. But come to Autoblog and look at it and see it for yourself. Second comment, I don't hate the name, but I always question car companies have huge marketing departments, and they must debate the names of vehicles for years while they're being designed and created, and yet they come up with such strange ideas, and it's like, I don't know what meetings they had in Lotus headquarters in the UK, and they said, you know what, this is the one we're going with. It's like, looking at it, you have no idea how to pronounce it. Eletre, and I think Eletre, I think that's roughly what they're going for. But I kind of prefer to call it El Eater. In Spanish, that'd be the Eater. And it looks kind of like the Eater if you see the big smiling front end, and it's almost like it's like an open jawed front look. So yeah, I'm going with that. Now, besides those, kind of sort of meaningless things, I'm expecting the platform to be excellent. If there's any one thing that Lotus is aces at, it is making a vehicle drive really well. The Elise, the Evora, Exige, all of the recent Loti, if you will, have been excellent to drive. I'm sure this is no different. It's kind of strange to see a crossover, especially an electric crossover, wearing the Lotus badge. As everyone here listening probably is aware, Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, his famous saying was, simplify and add lightness. It doesn't look anything simple or light about this vehicle, but let's not pretend that Lotus doesn't need to make money. And the best way to make money right now is by range-topping crossovers with high profit margins. That's exactly what this is going to be. It would make no sense for them to go with a gasoline-fueled vehicle at this point, put a whole bunch of research and development into that. A small car company. So electric makes sense. So the vehicle makes sense, despite the fact that it doesn't make sense with the Lotus badge. It sounds like I'm talking in circles, but that's just where we are in the automotive world right now. We're going to talk about Ferrari doing this. Lamborghini did it a while ago. Aston Martin has done it with the DBX. Every car company has to have a crossover right now, and they're all aiming for the sportiest, best driving crossover, and the utility in these brands doesn't really matter so much. There's still a lot that we don't know about this thing. All they've said is that it's going to have at least 600 horsepower and a battery pack with at least 100 kilowatt hours. And it's going to be all-wheel drive. But past that, we don't really know what range is going to be like. We don't really know what sort of performance. They've said 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds and a top speed of 161. But where is it actually going to land? What's it going to weigh? What's its efficiency going to be? There's a whole lot that we don't know about this thing.
We don't even actually know the price, right?
Correct.
You can still technically, I think, reserve one if you want.
Well, that's
kind of a weird situation.
It's the Tesla model, right? Show everybody this, and I don't mean to pick on Tesla. Ford did it with the Lightning. GMC did it with the Hummer. It's like the new wave of things. Show it off. Start taking reservations before anyone knows anything about it.
I guess if you have to ask the price, you probably can't afford it in this case. Whereas, you probably had some sense of how much the electric, the Lightning was going to cost. And, Tesla does have sort of some guide rails as far as how much their products cost. But no, it's intriguing. It also reminds me a little bit of the Kia EV6, which I think speaks to how good looking the Kia EV6 is and the Lotus is. So, we'll see. To your point, there's a lot we don't know here. I think that will also determine, I think we know enough about it that if you want this crossover, put your money in, put your reservation in. But because some of the other stuff, I would hope they would get it under 60 in less than 3 seconds, right? If this thing was 0 to 60, 5.2, it'd be well, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I think a RAV4 Prime does that,
Right. So, some blanks to fill in, but
the pricing, like you pointed out, is a really big one. We have to know what this thing's going to compete with, right?
Exactly. It's not going to be cheap. I think we can assume that. But the question is, how aggressive are they going to be? you know, and Lotus is just such a niche brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, it could really go a couple ways. Like this could be pretty exclusive, which I think that's where it's going to veer towards. But I mean, you could get like a relatively, and I use the term loosely, affordable Aston Martin Stelvio, you know, I mean, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, this is electric. So it's competitive set is going to be, you know, uniquely defined by that. And also, let's not forget that in a lot of places in the United States, it's kind of hard to even buy a Lotus. Like it's not like there's a dealership around every corner, you know, like that's an issue with a lot of smaller car brands, Alfa Romeo, even brands like Mini. I bought a Mini in 2006 when I lived in Toledo, Ohio, and I had to drive all the way to Cincinnati to get it, which was, you know, 3-4 hour drive. And it's even more spread out for Lotus dealerships.
It looks like there's 3 in Metro Detroit. There's one, looks like one in Birmingham, one in maybe Sterling Heights, and one in perhaps Wayne, though I can't totally confirm that. I'm just Google Mapsing it, make that a verb. I've seen the one off of Woodward, which is kind of a neat place for there
in Birmingham,
to be. Yeah, that's a good place for just Lotus to be, right on that strip where you get a lot of enthusiasts. And it does have a green and yellow Lotus sign. So anyways, so why don't we shift over to another sort of crossover type vehicle that's hard to say, the Ferrari Purosangue. You think I got that one right? I don't even know at this point how well we're doing with the vocabulary of these crossover type vehicles,
which reinforces my whole point about marketing departments coming up with these names. Like, are they doing it on purpose to like, does it actually, is there like some metric out there that shows that they generate more interest in a vehicle by giving it a difficult to pronounce name?
I mean, Google Trends doesn't like it, let's put it that way. But again, another beautiful looking exotic SUV, or crossover, I should say, sort of being said like as Ferrari's first crossover. I mean, the Ferrari FF was really more of a hatchback when I think of things, but that did have all-wheel drive, if I recall. So, I mean, you're starting to split the hairs a little bit. What's a crossover? What's not? What maybe is really in the car territory? But we have a teaser image out. We know it's going to be revealed at some point this year. This, to me, really feels like a Geneva reveal that won't be taking place, obviously, because, you know, there is no Geneva Motor Show this year. But I mean, to me, that would have been a very natural spot for it to be revealed. I also believe the Shanghai Auto Show was also canceled this year too. So that could have been another possible showing. But I mean, I guess we'll see it when we see it. Yep. You know, Ferrari does not lack money to promote its cars. I think they could be considered a blue blood, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I mean, I feel like we're so past the point of debating, like, is this a Ferrari? Should they do a crossover? To me, I'm just like, sure. You know, I think people will buy this. And in this case, I do think there will be a good market for this with Ferrari. I think it's a little more defined because Ferrari is currently, and I think, in a better place than Lotus.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what the Lotus is going to cost. We don't know what this Ferrari Purosangue, however you say it, is going to cost. And I know it's not pronounced that way, so don't send me an email. We also have only seen teasers of this. They haven't actually done a full, the full, this is it. We're looking at a picture of the front end right now. Big, huge air intakes up front. Front and center is a double Ferrari identifier. It's got the yellow and black prancing horse on the hood, and it's got the big chrome prancing horse directly in the center. And you know, that's all it needs to have for it to be a sales success, most likely. A lot of very well-heeled buyers are constantly, you know, fighting for the right to take home Ferrari's latest creation. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be super duper expensive. And you know, the big question is it going to be the fastest crossover in the world? Is it going to be the quickest accelerating crossover in the world? Are they going to be able to accelerate a Tesla Model X Plaid? Those are going to be, those are going to be the benchmarks. It's going to have to, they're going to want it to be faster than the Urus, quicker accelerating than anything else out there. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a profit machine.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can probably leave it there just because that sums it up pretty well. And we only have like a couple pictures of it that are not very descriptive other than like of the front end and some teasers. But to get our hands oily here, the Stellantis inline-six, I think, is really an interesting engine. It's going to come in a couple of different power versions, like pretty powerful and quite powerful. Let me put it that way. It's a turbo, which I think is interesting. I think I would have loved to have seen a naturally aspirated inline-six, but I mean, I guess if I'm asking for things, hey, stay with the V8. But I think this is really an intriguing engineering development for them, and they're going to use it in a wide variety of vehicles too, sort of as a replacement for some applications of the Hemi. So I'm excited to drive this. I think it's going to really add some new life to some of the products that they're going to put it in. Yeah.
And the inline-six, you mentioned at the outset, there's kind of a resurgence in inline-sixes. When you think inline-six, the first thing you think of probably is BMW, and they still make great ones. But a lot of other car brands, Jaguar, Lotus, and Mercedes-Benz have all come out with inline-sixes recently. Chevy has their diesel inline-six. It's just a really great design. Very little vibration, smooth revving design. This one, the Stellantis Hurricane, they're saying it's going to rev out to 6,100 RPM. And the high output one is the lower output base engine, 5,800 RPM. And it's like you said, there's no naturally aspirated version. I kind of think it's almost a missed opportunity that they didn't do that. Like if they're coming out with this engine family, it'd be cool if they replace the standard Pentastar V6 also with a naturally aspirated V6. But what these are really inline-six, what these are really intended to do is replace the Hemis. The standard output inline-six is going to weigh 430 pounds. It is going to make power at least as much as the 5.7 liter Hemi, and then there's the high output version one that is going to probably beat the output of the company's 6.4 liter, or the what they refer to as the 392. That one currently makes 485, 475. This one's going to be the new inline-six high output is going to be higher than that. They're saying 500 horse, 475 pound-feet. That's figures higher than the V8. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're exciting. It's the downsizing trend. Like, it's hard to say a relatively large inline-six engine is quite the same as Ford going to almost exclusively 2 to 2.3 to 2.7 liter twin turbo small displacement engines. These are bigger than that, but that's the Stellantis way of doing things, and this is kind of their way of bridging the gap until they come out with super high performance electric powertrains. These are going to replace their Hemis in things like the Rams and the Jeeps and whatnot.
I think it will. I sort of like your theory that maybe doing this is more of like a replacement for the Pentastar V6 would be. In an ideal world, I love that idea. And you've sort of seen that a little bit with some of the Mercedes and BMW uses of their inline-sixes. But I mean, from more of a practical perspective, yeah, I mean, those Hemis are big, heavy engines, like iron blocks, some of them, right?
I think they all are.
They're all, yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know which one would be something different, right? So, I mean, this is definitely a good evolution for the company. And I mean, I'm curious, which Stellantis product, I almost said FCA, are you most intrigued to drive this in? And they haven't really said everything, but which we know it's going to be in most of, the the powerful versions. So where do you think this will do the most damage, if you will?
Well, I think it's going to be a very heart of the market offering. They're not going to get rid of the 3.6 right now because it's in a whole lot of things. It's a relatively recent engine design, and it still works. Like there's no strong reason for them to replace it. There were really good reasons for them to replace the 5.7 and 6.4 Hemis. They're very old, like we said. I did look it up. They are all iron blocks. They're all big, heavy beasts. They're not helping the efficiency game any. And side point, the U.S. government's going to start soon doubling the fuel economy penalties that Stellantis has had to pay many, many years, buying credits from Tesla, et cetera, to avoid the biggest fines. Stellantis needs to downsize their engines. They need to increase their efficiency, but their customers also expect big power. Hence why we've got these turbocharged 3-liter inline-sixes with aluminum blocks that are going to be much less in weight. They're going to be, by a significant margin, more fuel efficient and more modern, easier for them to meet all the emissions and all those requirements that they have to have. And let's be honest, they're not ready to electrify everything right now. So they needed to do something, and this is their answer.
Yeah, I think the Pentastar it's a relatively new engine. I actually went to the factory where they make it on the east side of Detroit, and they had just started launched production at that time. This was a few years back at this point of the new generation of Pentastars, and generally those V6 engines, like companies use those for not like years. We're talking like decades. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of life in that engine. I just feel like at one point there was kind of a premium sheen to it. Now I feel like it's definitely going to be just like kind of that workhorse base engine that they're going to use until the end of like internal combustion. And then that'll be it.
And it makes sense too. I mean, let's not point a finger solely at Stellantis. GM has their 3.6. Ford has their, Ford's got several. They've got a 3.7. They've got their 3.5 Eco, but they've got, Ford. Ford is has moved further in internal combustion than most brands, but Toyota's the same way. Toyota has 2 different 3.5-liter V6s depending on the product. That oddly enough, they're not related at all. The LS, regular LS, has a 3.5. Lexus LS has a 3.5 V6. The hybrid has a 3.5 V6 that is totally different, with a hybrid component on it. Kia is the same. All their Tellurides have 3.5-liter V6s. The same for Honda. They put, these are like the mainstream go-to engines for big vehicles, in the same way that the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder is the go-to engine for compact vehicles. Larger than compact, midsize, they all have V6 options. And so I think it's fine that Chrysler just continues to rely on the Pentastar. I think it'd be cool if they did a naturally aspirated inline-six. It would be echoes of the classic Jeep 4-liter that enthusiasts still wish that they made now. And also you asked me a question: what am I most excited to see it in? Remember, they do make a Wrangler 392 now. That we expect that these inline-sixes, turbocharged inline-sixes, are going to eventually find their way into replacing all of the Hemi V8s. So, are we going to see a twin turbo 3-liter high output Wrangler? And if so, when could that happen? I think it's certainly on the table, but we're going to see them in things like, higher end Grand Cherokees and Wagoneers, and Rams probably first.
I think this in a Challenger would be very intriguing, especially a high output version. And I hope they would tune it so it sounds like we all want it to sound. So that would be my, my vote, I guess. Mm-hmm. So
that would be interesting though.
Yeah.
A twin turbo inline-six Challenger as opposed to a Hemi V8 Challenger.
I'm just intrigued by the idea. I think it might be interesting,
And if it's super smooth and revs out, what if they put it in a Charger and said, all right, BMW, we see your 5 Series, 5 Series, whatever, and we up you with this, with it, with our smooth revving, high output inline-six. I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
I also find the GMC, the GMC Hummer is now in production. That's interesting. And they have 65,000 orders for it. I've actually seen a few of them on the roads around here, which is, probably not so interesting given, that Metro Detroit is filled with people who, have access to prototypes and maybe even some of the early models. I actually saw a Cadillac Lyric on the road the other day, which just super random.
Yeah.
But people are starting to move on these things. We're seeing, you wrote this piece where, 95% of buyers are actually going ahead. I guess I shouldn't say buyers, I should say hand raisers are then going ahead with their order, which I guess makes sense, but there's a lot of demand for this vehicle.
Yeah. And 65,000 orders is a really big number for something this expensive.
Yeah.
From GM too, it wouldn't be terribly surprising. Well, not even would be. We weren't like super shocked when Tesla reported hundreds of thousands of hand raisers for the Cybertruck, right? Because there's a whole cult of Tesla out there, this super weird Blade Runner-y thing, and it was inexpensive to put an order in. So a lot of people were just like, hey, I'll put my name in the line and we'll see, when it comes out. But that thing, the Cybertruck was, you can get a nice one at what they projected back then. We'll see what actually happens in reality. But people were looking at $40,000, $50,000, not eventually 80,000 to 110, 120,000 for one of these Hummers. That's a lot of people plunking down their own money to stand in line for a $100,000+ electric truck from Hummer. That is a very interesting stat that 95% of those people are currently converting their reservations into actual orders. General Motors is on the record in an interview, I think with CNBC, but they're on the record saying that they didn't expect this much demand. They're doing everything they can to increase output at their production plant. Obviously, they're probably hinging their ability to build these vehicles on battery supplies and battery constraints. That's always the big deal right now because all these cars have thousands and thousands of tiny little cells all wired together to make a big huge pack. And this is a really big pack because it's a really big vehicle. And heavy, what was it, like 9,000 pounds, something?
It's almost cartoonishly heavy, yeah.
Yeah, and wait till you start seeing these things on the streets. They're big. These are big, big things, like heavy-duty truck, big kind of electric vehicles. So I'm a little surprised that they've seen that much early success with it. To say that they are selling everyone that they can potentially build is an understatement. If you put an order in today, they're saying that you probably wouldn't get a truck delivered until 2024. The real question, though, is which edition of the Hummer are people plunking down their money for, and how long are they willing to wait in line for it? That's the unanswered question, because the lineup goes. Let's see. Let me pull up the article while I'm talking on the phone. Here's how the upward trajectory goes. Eventually, they're going to be building what they call the Hummer EV2. I don't know why they didn't start with the 1, but it's the EV2. That one's going to cost $80,000, but it's not even they're not even talking about building those into something like 2024. A year prior to that, there's the $90,000 Hummer 2X. At some point soon, they're going to switch to building the Hummer EV3X. That's going to be right around $100,000. The ones that they're currently delivering right now are the highest edition 1 models. Those things start at $110,000 plus. So that's what's being delivered now. So if you're seeing them on the road in 2022, it's probably that very highest end 1,000 foot-pound of torque, crazy edition that you're seeing. Eventually, we're going to see lower end models, but they didn't break down how many of those 65,000 reservations are for which edition and how long those buyers are going to have to, theoretically wait for their delivery.
A lot of fun to drive. I drove the prototype last fall, and our news editor, Joel Stocksdale, is out driving one this week. So more on that to come after the embargo, if you will. We should have some good article, good videos on that. But talk some sports. It is the Final Four weekend, which is oftentimes that's a lot of fun. As someone who went to Michigan State, we've been in quite a few of those. So it's definitely a time of the year I traditionally like, although a little bit of an early exit this year. But thought it might be kind of fun to talk about just who are the blue bloods in the automotive sense. Because when you look at the Final Four, it's Duke, North Carolina, Villanova, and Kansas. You've got like teams that have won among the most national championships and all-time wins in basketball, just of all time. Like it's basically a dream Final Four. My team got knocked out by Duke, and I'm still going to try to watch both these games, all three of these games, including the title game. So,
and not to mention, it's Mike Krzyzewski's last year. Krzyzewski. It's someone with the last name
Krzyzewski, right?
With someone with the last name Korzeniewski, I should be better at that, right?
You should be better at that. Yeah.
Krzyzewski.
So,
totally, all blue bloods. To echo what you said, and I think there's a lot of interest in watching because remember North Carolina was the team that delivered Coach K. That's easier.
There you go.
His last home loss. At Duke's home court. So a lot of intrigue here. It's hard though.
It's really tough because we were talking about this offline too, because it's not exactly like based on sales or the oldest brand or like cachet. So it obviously is a little bit different. And I mean, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. If I had a beer in front of me, I'd be drinking it. This is definitely barstool conversation here. But, you can, if you want to throw in like some football analogies too, that's fine too. Cause obviously like, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, Oklahoma, etc. Are sort of football blue bloods. But I mean, who are your like, I don't know, automotive blue bloods? Give me a few, just, off the top of your head here. And then maybe we'll narrow it down. Come up with the Final Four.
Okay. I don't know exactly how to rank these, but I'll start with brands, car companies that I would think are probably vying for that number one overall seed. And the very first one that pops into mind is one that we've already mentioned. That's Jeep. Not so much because they sell so many vehicles, even though their sales are strong. But when you're talking blue bloods, I don't think there's a car company. I'd like to see the stats, but I don't think there's a car company globally that quite has the reach of Jeep. There's a lot of countries where they say Jeep, whether it's actually a Jeep or not. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's got to be globally up there in the number one space. And let's not forget the reason that a lot of car companies still exist or were purchased by other larger entities was specifically to get the Jeep brand, because it's got so much so much worldwide and global influence. So I'd start there. From there, it kind of gets a little murky. I feel like Ferrari's got to be up there. It's probably the most valuable brand name in the world for car companies.
Yeah.
I don't know that for sure, but judging from their big IPO and just overall value of the brand, it's up there. I don't really think of Ferrari as a blue blood automaker, though.
Maybe a red blood?
A red blood. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, nicely done, Greg.
Yeah.
Mercedes-Benz would be a blue blood to me. They lay claim to the first motorized vehicle in the world. Back then we're talking Daimler, but then, the Benz, and then Mercedes was a model, and then it became Mercedes-Benz. But Mercedes-Benz is what everybody knows. That's got to be way up there. And I would say Ford probably would have to be up there. And Chevy fans, don't be mad at me. I know, Chevy is the all-American brand. I don't know, is it kind of the Kansas of, or yeah, maybe the Kansas of the group, kind of that all-American blue blood Chevy, but Ford maybe has a little bit greater history. And, I think there's also something to be said that the company itself is Ford and the brand is Ford, whereas the company with Chevy is General Motors, and the, Chevrolet is a brand of General Motors. Ford is the brand and the company. So I'll go there. And there's so many other ones. Volkswagen came immediately to mind. They've got, they're one of the three biggest companies in the three biggest automakers in the world. Toyota obviously is currently the largest. So, they have to be in the conversation too. But I've thrown out more than four. What are your thoughts, Greg?
No, that's a good one. That's a good list. And I think, I'll throw out a bunch here and maybe we can kind of narrow them down, see if we agree on a four or get,
Sure.
Whatever. I would do, so I think I'd throw Ferrari in there. I'd go with Ford because, again, they have so far two very long histories, if you will. The Ford brand, and again, the Ford brand, not the company, if you will, because companies gets too confusing here a little bit. I think you got to have Mercedes in there. Let's see. I'm going to throw Toyota in there too, just because of their long history of development and sales volume. To me, you get them in there. That almost reminds me a little bit of and stay with me here. Maybe it's almost like an Oklahoma in football or an Ohio State in football, where they've had their periods of success. Other programs have been probably greater in different times, but they've just been good for a really long time. So I would do that. Did I say Cadillac? I feel like Cadillac would be they're tough. Maybe they're barely in,
They're kind of the Oklahoma to me, because they're, if you're talking football, they're or maybe even Notre Dame.
That's a good analogy right there.
I mean, they squeak in, or they squeak out, and that's how I think on Cadillac.
I tend to want to throw there's a lot of brands you could throw out there, just based on the idea of prestige. Is Alfa Romeo or Maserati a blue blood, or Aston Martin? Well, theoretically, yeah, they're the definition of old money brands, but from a sporting perspective, I mean, these guys are like Yale in football. They were good 100 years ago.
Uncompetitive.
And you've got, it's competitive, And what's interesting to me about in basketball, the Final Four, is you have all these great brands that are good right now, So, I mean, I don't know. I'll throw this kind of grenade at you. Is Tesla a blue blood?
No, not by definition, I think. And I think they're the most valuable brand out in the world. Well, they're the most valuable car company. And we're splitting hairs when we talk about value of the brand / value of the company and all that kind of thing. Stock people are throwing money at Tesla and making it the most valuable car company. But, if a brand actually went up for sale, I think probably Ferrari and Jeep would be, the two to beat, just in long-term viability moving forward.
Tesla's like Clemson in football to me, awesome in this century, but before that,
they're not the old money, they're the new money.
I mean, we're about the same age. I don't remember Clemson football much, I mean, granted, we probably both grew up in the North, but
as an Ohio State fan, I sadly remember Clemson a little more than you do. They've beaten us a bunch of times, and also wasn't it Clemson that Woody Hayes got fired over?
Yeah. Okay. So I do remember that a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
But Clemson shouldn't have won that game, or shouldn't have been winning that game, which is why he was so mad. So
fair enough.
Probably not the blue blood that you'd put up there.
So I will give you 4 here, and then we do have a pretty good review here we got to run through at the end of the show, which is an interesting way to do it. My final 4: Ford, Ferrari. I'm going to throw Mercedes in, and then Toyota. That's my 4. And this is all time blue bloods, if you will, with Cadillac and Chevy and a bunch of others just missing the cut for this year's Final Four, if you will. Maybe they'll have a good recruiting class and get back there next year.
Okay.
But
run
that's
through those,
how I do
Run
it.
through those again, top to bottom.
Ford, Ferrari, Toyota, and Mercedes. And again, just missing the cut, like in the Elite Eight, you've got Cadillac, Chevy, Jeep, Honda, and a few others.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my Final Four. Who are yours?
Oh, I'm going to go.
Feel free to duplicate too.
Well, I'm going to go slightly different. You know, I'm probably biased growing up around the Jeep brand as much as I did, but I just feel like it's got to be, you know, just in its global reach, it's got to be like blue blood city to me. So I'm going Jeep, I'm going Ford, and then I'm going to say Toyota and Volkswagen.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing that is because they're constantly fighting over the global sales lead. And any year you wouldn't be surprised if either one of them took it. And so much history, so old, you know, kind of that's it. And, you know, remember Volkswagen, as the VW group, also owns a whole bunch of other really well-known, including Porsche, which we haven't mentioned yet, but Porsche,
that was another one.
Porsche is hard to leave out of a blue blood conversation, but so I'm taking the cheaters route and nominating Volkswagen with a shout out to Porsche helps put them into that top four. So that's where I'm going. Ford, Jeep, Volkswagen, and Toyota.
All right. Well, let's shift back to normal programming here. Close out the show here with the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk. I've really been impressed with the Grand Cherokee, this new version of it. But what do you think? What did you do with it?
So I had the Trailhawk. You probably, if you're listening to the Autoblog podcast, you are aware of what Trailhawk means in Jeep terms. That means it's got all of the off-road stuff. It is, Trailhawk is to Grand Cherokee what Rubicon is to Wrangler. So Trailhawk means it's got the top end four-wheel drive system, complete with low range, which in the latest Grand Cherokee means a push button activated for four-wheel low. I do miss the lever. All the Jeeps that I had growing up had a lever, a console mounted lever that, you really gave a good solid yank to, and you knew it was boom in four-wheel drive because you just put the manual effort into doing it. I do miss that. But I did test out the four-wheel low by push button and it worked fine. If you're looking for like that, audio sense that it did it, you do hear the servos clicking or hydraulic pumps whirring or something like that. So it went in. It's got disconnecting sway bars,
Nice.
which that's super interesting for something like a Grand Cherokee. Some figure really close to 100% of all Jeep Grand Cherokees are never going to venture into anything more than grass fields and dirt roads and muddy access roads for camping or whatever it is. But we've gotten to a point where to differentiate Jeep's top level Grand Cherokee, they're putting in disconnecting sway bars, something that the Wrangler Rubicon has had for a while now. I did put those to the test as well. I could not find any berms or rocks or anything big enough in the Columbus, Ohio area to properly put that the disconnecting sway bars into a proper test. So I headed to a man-made lake and found a boat launch. It's a double-sided boat launch divided by a very large concrete barrier or berm, so to speak. And I was able to put the passenger side wheels up on the berm, let the driver's side wheels stay down towards the boat ramp. And I was able to visually see just how much additional articulation you can get out of the front end by disconnecting the sway bars. In case you're wondering, you can actually hit the button to disconnect the sway bars when you're in a very high level of articulation. the button starts blinking, but it doesn't actually disconnect. You do have to be on somewhat level ground for that push button sway bar disconnect to work. A little disappointed by that. I think the Ford Bronco has a hydraulically actuated system that does actually allow you to disconnect even at a higher degree of articulation than you can with the Jeep. So I would say, therefore, the Ford system might be a little bit better. But again, it's just great that you can, if you are a hardcore off-roader and you are wanting a family-sized SUV or crossover, you do legitimately have a strong off-road option. The other thing that the Trailhawk offers is additional ground clearance through the use of a, I think, 5-step air suspension system, also accessible via buttons inside the cabin. Come back later on Autoblog, I shot a video showing just how big of a difference there is between the lowest setting and the highest setting. And I've done that before with other high-end off-road, luxurious off-roaders like the Range Rover series that have the adjustable and user-selectable ride height, not automatic. If you don't want to play with all those things, there is just a regular old mode set of modes. There's Sport, which seems incongruous in something like a Grand Cherokee Trailhawk, but there is a Sport mode. It drops it into its lowest setting, lowest ride height for more aerodynamics, and I guess, some sportier feel. I think that's kind of dumb and unnecessary. But then there's Auto, there's like snow, there's mud, and there's rock, and it slowly raises itself as you go up through those modes. So you can let the system do everything for you, or you can play around with it manually. And yeah, I mean, I don't have like off-roading anywhere near me that is actually going to be something that would like truly challenge a Grand Cherokee. I did find a lot of muddy hunting roads, and I didn't want to make a mess that would, deter other people from enjoying dirt roads. So I went and found some that were already disasters, and tested out all the systems. Everything worked well. I was able to, lock the drivetrain. I was able to, get to a point where I was wheel slipping, getting to a point where I could tell that there was greater contact patch in the front tires with the disconnecting sway bar and all that good stuff. So I'll say I didn't test the Grand Cherokee Trailhawk to its point of failure, but I tested it way harder and further than pretty much any buyer is going to subject it to. And I mean, it came out aces. I can't think of any sort of situation that a buyer of a Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk is going to be like incapable of traversing in this thing. Also, mine had a 3.6 liter Pentastar that we've talked ad nauseum about already, and plenty of power. I don't think you really need to upgrade from that.
No, I think it's a really aesthetically pleasing SUV. I think this new generation of Grand Cherokee is a step forward for them. It's really sort of like the highest evolution of what the Grand Cherokee has come to be in the last, say, 10, 15 years. And I think it's good to see that you actually really pushed it. We don't always get a chance to take even Wranglers do, like, maybe not to the fail point, but really get them out how they should be tested. So for Grand Cherokee, which will be used for like, a lot of commuting duty, probably less so with the Trailhawk. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you do want to at least get it muddy and do stuff with it. Yeah. But it's, as we expect, it sounds super capable.
Yeah, and I'm just going to close with this. If you don't plan on testing out any of those things, and you never think you're going to hit that disconnecting sway bar button, and you never think you're going to hit that four-wheel low button, don't buy the Trailhawk. Buy a more on-road oriented version, a limited, or if you can spend a little bit more, the Summit, because the thing is really luxurious if you equip it right. So yeah, I mean, don't hurt yourself in the long run by choosing one with all these off-road features that you're never going to use. But if you are going to use them, it's awesome that they make it.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. Send us your Spend My Monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Drop in the comments. Who is your Final Four of the automotive world? We'll leave it there. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.